Please give a big Joplin welcome to the third row Democrat, Jess Piper!
I drove here today 4 hours from Hopkins, Missouri, and I'm pretty sure there are more people in this room than I have in my entire town. My name is Jess Piper. I'm from the cornfields and the bean fields of Northwest Missouri, and I'm traveling the state and the heartland to talk about what is going on in government right now, what started in Missouri, and what has now leapt out into the entire nation. But first I want to tell you why I ran. I was an English literature teacher for 16 years, never planned to do anything else. I taught in rural schools, which meant that I had 4, 5, even 6 different preps every day. I taught 7 through 12 in a lot of schools. And then I finally got to Maryville, and I was able to teach junior American Lit, just juniors all day long, and I found the love that I was always looking for, and that was in that classroom, and I was happy to be there, and I never would have done anything else if not for 2018 when Missouri passed an abortion ban with no exemptions for rape or incest, and I was angry. How many of you have tried to call your representative and they never tried to get back in touch with you? Well, what? That's crazy, right? So that's what happened to me too. My representative was named Alan Andrews, and I knew him, and I reached out to him because he had written, an article in the Maryville Forum to say that he was happy to sign that abortion ban, and I was incensed. So I wrote to him, and he didn't write me back, and I called and emailed and texted him, and nothing. And finally, I decided that I was going to out myself as a pro-choice teacher in a tiny community, and I wrote a rebuttal to Alan and to the Maryville Forum, and that went as well as you can expect. I did it anyway. My husband's like, oh my God. And I still didn't hear from Alan. So I'm sitting at home one day with my husband, who's also a teacher. I said, call Alan. He said, I don't want to call Alan. I said, I just need you to call him. 20 minutes later, my husband had a phone call. And he said, it's Alan. I said, no, it's not. It's his legislative aide. I've spoken to him over and over again. He said, no, Jess, it's Alan. I said, you tell him to call me. And my husband did. And as soon as I got that phone call, I lit into him. I told him what I thought, and he told me 2 things I will never forget. Jess, I don't have to talk to you, and I called you out of a favor to your husband. And I always say, I don't know what happened the next 30 minutes. I think I blacked out. I have no idea. No one has ever said anything like that to me. But I knew right then and there that he was telling me the truth. He didn't have to talk to me. You know why? He ran unopposed 8 years over and over again. No one opposed him. He didn't have to talk to Democrats. He didn't have to talk to Republicans. He didn't have to talk to anybody because he was untouchable, because no one opposed that man. And I still decided I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to do much about that, because in Missouri, we're one of 4 states where teachers can be fired for running for office. One of 4 states. That's real convenient to keep 68,000, mostly women, really known people from running for office. And I know that that's on purpose. But everything changed in 2020 when I went to vote for Joe Biden, and there was not one Democrat down ballot for me to vote for. And I got sick of going home and talking to people, and people saying, well, you get what you vote for. How could I get what I wanted when I had no one to vote for? So I went home 2020, November, and I told my husband, if nobody else is going to run, I'm going to do it. And I did. And I got my butt kicked. I got taken to the woodshed. It was bad. I got 25% of the vote, but this is what I think every time I go out in my community. 1 in 4 people, I'm an English teacher, that's right? 1 in 4. 1 in 4 people voted for me. 1 in 4 people voted for someone who talked about abortion, who talked about the fact that we were in a child care desert, who talked about the fact that our hospitals are closing. Do you know that under 22 years, under a GOP supermajority, we have lost 19 rural hospitals? 19. And that means that people who want to deliver a baby, who have a wanted baby, have to drive an hour and a half, like I did, to deliver. It means people like me in the middle of nowhere, Northwest Missouri, have to drive 2 hours while my husband is in the hospital and sleep in the parking lot because I'm not allowed to sleep in the hospital and I don't have enough money for a hotel room. And that is what's going on under a GOP supermajority. And people will look at places like Missouri and say, well, they can't mean for this to happen. They can't mean to disenfranchise their people. Yes, they do. They absolutely do. If you want to know what they want for the entire country, you look at rural Missouri. You see what they have done to our communities, and they want to take that nationwide. They want to defund our schools. They want to defund our infrastructure. They want to make sure that our hospitals are closed. They want to take away higher education, and they want people to be able to willing to take whatever they can get. What is happening in this state is happening nationwide. They use, how many of you read Project 2025? You are already living it. You already know what's happening because they did it here. Because Missouri was a proving ground just like every other red state in this country. So when people ask what's going on, look at Missouri. Look what's happening here. You know, yesterday we had some Doge-like activity happening in this state. We had Denny Hoskins, our Secretary of State, tell half of the people who were working for the state archives that they no longer have a job. And he did it on a Friday, right? He said, you got 30 days and that's it. What do we need archivists for? I don't know. You ever heard of something called the SAVE Act? They are trying to take away the right of women to vote. Do you know what I need to vote if that passes? I can't just use my driver's license anymore because my parents didn't know I was going to marry a guy named Piper. My name doesn't match, right? I called my Congressman Sam Graves and I talked to his office and I said, what am I going to need to vote if this passes? He says, your driver's license. I said, that doesn't match with my birth certificate. And he said, well, then you need a marriage certificate. And I said, does my husband need one? And he said, well, no. And I said, do you see the problem? Do you see the problem? This is meant for women. I sounded like a crazy person for years when I was saying they don't want women to vote. I'm telling you God's honest truth. They do not want women to vote. We are seeing outrageous corruption going on at the federal level, but we see it here at the state level too. And one of the biggest things for me, I'm all about education. I taught for 16 years. It is the key to success for every single child in this state. And we have a state representative. His name is Josh Hurlburt. He is a part-time legislator and a full-time employee of the Herzog Foundation. You know what the Herzog Foundation does?
Project 20.
Yeah, they siphon money from public schools and send it to private religious schools. Guess who is in charge of holding on to the money for the state for that program? The Herzog Foundation. Josh Hurlburt from Smithville goes down to Jeff City every single year and writes bill after bill after bill to privatize our public school, to send taxpayer money to private religious schools. That is corruption. That is a conflict of interest, and it is in front of our face. And when I say something to them, they laugh. They laugh at me. They don't have to talk to anyone. They don't have to talk to journalists. They don't care because they're going to do this corruption and they're going to flaunt it. Why? To make us feel like it doesn't matter. To make us feel like we're up against something there's nothing we could do because there is a fire hose of information being blown at us every single day, every minute of the day that's meant to make you disengage, that's meant to make you feel like you can't do anything about it because they're going to do it anyway. But I'm telling you, I'm looking in a room of 200 people in Joplin, Missouri on a Saturday afternoon, and you're not going to stop. Woo! They want us to feel scared of what will happen if we dissent. I like those hats, by the way, ladies. Dissent. They want us to feel upset and scared if we stand out in meetings, but I'm scared of what will happen to this country if we don't do it, if we don't stand up, if we don't stop telling them that we are not going to take this. The Republicans have no policies, nothing. They have culture wars, and it's hard to talk to people who are embedded in these culture wars. Ask me how I know. My family is MAGA. My mom comes up and says things, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have never heard this information in my life. She's living in a different reality. They're not in the same reality. I talk to a lot of journalists from the coast, and they say, well, how can you flip a Trump voter? You can't. You can't. Not at this point. They voted for him 3 times. They've been drinking the Kool-Aid. There is nothing you can do, but what you can do is find people who were apathetic, people who didn't show up in the last election. We had 8 million Democrats that didn't show up for Kamala Harris, so we've got to find those people and show them what's going on before it's too late. because they don't want us to vote. I've heard a lot of people say, these Republicans, they just do whatever they want. Aren't they scared of what's going to happen in the midterm? They don't plan on there being a midterm, friends. They don't plan on you voting again. They're doing this stuff out in the open because they think that there's going to be no consequences. Speaking of consequences, your congressman, Eric Burleson, what is going on with this man? I'm going to give you another minute to boo. Eric Burleson. You know, I'm going to take pictures from this and I'm going to post it and I'm going to tag him and I'll say, well, I had all these people show up in Joplin, Missouri. I wonder if you could do the same. And by golly, you would show up, wouldn't you? You would show up. Eric Burleson is the one who wrote SAPA, the Second Amendment Preservation Act. It was, you know, we turned it back in Missouri, but the first thing he did whenever he went into Congress was write that same bill for everyone in the entire country. If we don't stop these crazy lunatics in our own state, they just keep moving up. And this is why we oppose every single race. We have people like Mike Johnson, who is the Speaker of the House, who was moved up into power and very rarely was ever opposed. He went from Louisiana state legislator who never had anybody run against him, and now he's the Speaker of the House. This is why I beg people from the coast and from these blue states to pay attention to red states, because what is happening here is meant to happen in the entire country. People would look at me and say, you belong in New York, you belong in California, you don't belong in Missouri. Well, friends, where can we go now? There's nowhere to run now. I told them from the beginning, they're rolling over us to get to you, and they did it. And that's why every single person in here is well equipped to fight back, because you know you've been fighting for 2 decades. You know you write your representative, they don't call you back. You ask for what you need, they don't give 2 shits what you need. You guys are the ones who know how to fight this, and that's why I'm always telling these blue states, look at red states, look at what they're doing. You have people who are in the prime of their life, people who should be able to be retired and playing with grandchildren and, you know, raising chickens, and they're standing in the medians of highways with signs because they know what has happened. And how many of you have been fighting for Roe for decades? Raise your hand. I'm so angry about this, and this has gotten us national attention. I was in rural Missouri. I took up signatures for people who wanted to put abortion on the ballot. I went to a little town called Marceline, 2,000 people. There was a lady out there waiting for me. She signed it. She stood up. She grabbed her phone and texted her Bible group and told them, don't forget, Jess is in town, come sign it. Her Bible group. That's because, you know what? Christians can be Democrats and Democrats can be Christians. They told us what they were going to do from the beginning. They told us, you do whatever you want. You put it on the ballot. It doesn't matter because we're going to overturn it. And I didn't think they were going to be able to do it this quickly, but by God, they did. And right now it's in the courts, and abortion is effectively banned in this state where we voted for it. 1.3 million Missourians voted for it. And this is what I tell you. I think 1.3 million Missourians ought to be in Jeff City to tell them, you are not taking our vote. You are not overturning our will. We are not going to do this anymore. We had to gather 180,000 signatures to put paid sick leave and a higher minimum wage on the ballot. They overturned our will with a vote. They didn't even have to take up one single signature to do that. There is corruption out in the open in Missouri, and we've got to call it what it is. Judges are being arrested. In Newark, New Jersey, they arrested a judge. And then we've seen people, or their mayor, I'm sorry. We've seen people disappeared from the street. We see people in masks, people that aren't in uniform, people in vehicles that are not marked, disappearing people on the streets. They are kidnapping them. We have to stop saying they are deporting people. We don't know where they are or where they are going. They are trying to get rid of due process, which means I don't care if you look like me. Once due process is gone, you can go as well too. And this is something we need to tell our conservative neighbors about. This thing with Doge, it wasn't to save or money or fraud or waste or abuse. It was to get your data. It was to get your data, and that is the most powerful thing they can have. Look at other countries with authoritarian rule. Look at China. Look at these places. They have the data so that they can squash dissent. They can't even hardly say or look up the word democracy. They can't look up Tiananmen Square anymore. It's blocked from their internet. This is a reason they don't want teachers teaching real history, because if we don't know about it, you can't fight for it. If you don't know what a democracy looks like, you can't fight for it. If you don't have a word for the color pink, you can't see the color pink. And this is what they're doing to our country in these small steps. But now it's happening quickly, right? They're moving very quickly. We knew it would be bad, but we didn't know it would happen as quick as it did. What's happening in rural Missouri is planning to happen all over the country. USDA broke contracts with farmers and ranchers. There was over $1 billion cut from USDA. Do you know what that program did? Farmers and ranchers in my part of the world were sending fresh food to schools and food banks, and it is gone. Those farmers and ranchers needed that money, and these schools needed that fresh food. Now here's a statistic that kind of irks me. 78.8% of farmers and ranchers voted for Trump. We are in the find out stage, right? Not all of them, obviously, not all rural people, obviously, but enough of them to make a difference. If they aren't given money to, overcome these tariffs, I think we may see a lot of them deciding they want to do something different. It may be too late. The SAVE Act, the market manipulation, we're seeing things, this corruption just out in the open. The tariffs things, have you guys seen the taco reference? Trump always chickens out. He always chickens out. And this is because he's trying to be a strong man, but he's not as strong as other people in other countries, and he's actually not a strong man at all, is he? I mean, yeah, exactly. So we know that they're going to keep trying to overturn our will. There's a guy named Rick Bratton who's over around Harrisonville. He's a senator. He went in front of a mic with his entire chest, and he said that he didn't believe that Missourians should have direct democracy. He said it. They used to hide that stuff, but now they're just saying it out loud. Somebody said, well, what do you expect? He said, I am elected. I'm the one who will make the choice. Your Congressman, Eric Burlison, thinks the same exact thing. Eric Burlison is constantly talking about being pro-life, right? He's not pro-life, because this is the thing. He doesn't stand for public education. He doesn't stand for higher wages or affordable health care or finding daycares and daycare deserts. He doesn't care about giving kids health care. In fact, he thinks that you guys in this room are probably addicted to health care. That's what he would say. I'm addicted to health care. I enjoy it. Missouri schools. We were 50th in the country for starting teacher pay, but good news, we're 49th now. I don't know who's 50th. I assume it's Mississippi. Thank God for Mississippi. Right? It's a state motto. Thank God for Mississippi. We are 49th in starting teacher pay, 49th in educational funding. 33% of our schools are on a 4-day week, and that is directly result of the Missouri GOP pulling funding for 22 years. After COVID, we had kind of some bad scores because kids weren't in school. The second they got those scores, they couldn't find a microphone fast enough, could they? They were like, see, we told you, Missouri public schools are no good. Missouri public school teachers are no good. And this is what I say to that. Who's been in charge of Missouri schools for 22 years? They defunded the schools to be able to say that. They said they didn't have any money for the schools. Well, how'd you find $50 million for private religious schools, Mike, right? Mike Kehoe just tried to pass that through. I went from poverty to a graduate degree because of public schools and public school teachers and Pell Grants. You don't need a tinfoil hat to realize what they are doing, rolling back funding for public schools at the same time they are rolling back child labor laws. Look around, friends. When people say, what are they going to do when they send all these immigrants home? Well, what do you think they're going to do? Betsy DeVos, which was a horrible, yes, groans appropriate. Even worse, I think, than the WWE queen we got in right now. Betsy DeVos said something that I found at least refreshing because she told the truth. Somebody asked her about private schools, private religious schools, and vouchers in rural spaces. Because you can give someone like me 20 vouchers, it doesn't matter. I still don't have any place to take my kid. And she said, well, this is what I think about vouchers in rural spaces. I imagine the kids can get headphones and go out into the fields and work and listen to great books. After they're done in the fields, they can find an apprenticeship at a John Deere factory. When they're done at the factory, they can go home and mom and dad can hire a private tutor. And this is what I heard. Rural kids don't deserve an education. Rural kids don't deserve a building, don't deserve certified teachers, don't deserve any of that. Rural kids deserve to go to work. And they mean it, friends. They've absolutely meant it. They're sending all this money to private religious schools so they can indoctrinate those kids, right? I was born and raised a Southern Baptist. I understand. When I talk about Christian nationalism, I am not talking about Christianity. I'm talking about Christian nationalism, and friends, it is running rampant. You have a senator that held his fist up once, right? Then ran as fast as he could. Run, Josh, run. He was caught on a mic saying the quiet part out loud. He said, I am a Christian, I am a nationalist, and I am proud to be a Christian nationalist. That absolutely sent shivers down my spine. Christian nationalism. There was a time when Christianity and religion ruled the world, and it was called the Dark Ages. I don't want to go back. They want to indoctrinate. They want young girls to learn to be submissive to men. They want young men to learn to be submissive to their employer. They want a compliant and cheap workforce, and racism and sexism are just extra for them, right? I think the worst part of watching this administration is watching all the completely unqualified people stripping our rights, stripping critical funding from infrastructure like museums, like libraries and schools, from health organizations. They are giving tax cuts to the wealthiest people to get rid of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They want it all to fail, and we're all confused. Like, do they want this to fail? Yes, absolutely. These people like RFK Jr. I mean, some of the worst people. Did you guys see that paper he just published? It was full of AI. There were no sources in there. We have the dumbest people running this country. I have to tell you, there are not a lot of moderate voters left. There aren't a lot of swing voters left. And whenever I talk to people, they're like, why don't you be a little less brash? Why don't you be a little nicer? Maybe people would change over. No, they wouldn't. Because this is what happens every time when we go and they want to compromise. You know what they want to compromise on? Trans kids. That's what they want. We stand with trans kids because trans kids are people. Woo! You a message of what we can do, and that is to absolutely make sure there is no seat uncontested, to make sure that every single Republican who makes it down to Jeff City at least had a fight to get there. And you had that last time. You had a lady named Missy running for Congress against Eric. We've got to do it again. We have to realize that there are a lot of these places where we're not going to flip it in one cycle. That's why my job with Blue Missouri is very difficult, because I'm asking people to give money to races who will not win, because that's the only way we build a bench. And if we look back at how the GOP has been very good at what they do, it's because they started at the grassroots level. They started with school boards. They started with city councils. They started with things like county commissioner. You know how much power county commissioner has? Yes. These things are all important. So we run against people knowing we will lose, but we support them anyway. And that's how we come back against what they have done to us. I want to tell you one little story before I leave, before I take some questions, and that's about after the 2024 election. 2016 woke me up because I was in Obama land, everything was fine, and then Trump. But then we got Biden, and so we were able to sort of chill for a little bit, but not really, because Trumpism was there. MAGA never went away. They kept working. They kept coalescing. But 2024, November, I was just defeated. And I do this for a living. I'm used to feeling like this. I live in Missouri, for goodness sake. But I love Minnesota. I love that blue state. I love the North Shore. And I thought, you know what? I got some money in my pocket, and I thought, I'm going to go to Minnesota. Because, a lot of people know my name. Every Republican in this state knows my name. So I thought, I'll just go there and buy some land, and if something happens, well, I'm on the boundary waters, and I can just make it to Canada, right? And Canada would be like, I don't think so, lady. Get back that canoe and head back over. But while I was in Minnesota looking for something, I realized I was passing barns with Trump on it. I was driving into small towns where there was MAGA gear being sold. I was turning on the radio and I was hearing people talk about, what great things were going to happen in the country with Elon Musk at the helm. And I realized at that point, there is nowhere to run. There is nowhere to run. And this is my state too, right? This is your state too. We shouldn't have to run. So what I want you to do is this, what you're doing right now. I want you to link arms. I want you to look at each other and tell each other that you are going to be there and you are going to fight until the end. This will not stand. That we will keep putting pressure on everyone in Jeff City and everybody at the federal level. But let me tell you this, what's happening in this state, in this country, all that bad stuff's coming from Jeff City. So I hope that we're keeping our eyes in the right place. I don't know which direction Jeff City is from here. Jeff City, okay? But I want you to link arms. I want you to look at each other and be there for each other and say, no more. We're not accepting any of this anymore. Draw the line in the sand. You will not do one more thing. Thank you, friends. No kings on the 14th, yep.
What is the Democratic Party going to make as their first fight? I mean, is it, we want to fight back against that, but what's the first thing they're going to do? You've got to have some kind of program. Is it going to be repealing United Citizens so that, we can clean up the campaign finance mess? What is the program? How come there's no kind of message except we're not Trump? Well, everybody knows that.
I think
what kind of legislation are we going to fight for besides, I don't know, what?
Yeah, so what's happening right now is a shock and awe campaign. It's meant to overwhelm us, and it's meant to overwhelm Democrats that are elected. And so right now, every single shot over the bow, they're trying to stop. And of course, they're working with the courts. And the courts are winning. We are winning. The thing is, Trump is not obeying the courts, and that's the problem. And messaging with Democrats is pretty difficult. Ask me how I know. But the thing is, we're all critical thinkers. We don't fall in line behind MAGA. We don't, we need more than a slogan for us. And so it's more difficult with our people because we have moderates all the way to socialists underneath this big umbrella of Democrats. But I am seeing people fight back. The thing is that I have told over and over again, and I talked to Ken Martin, who is the new DNC chair, I was like, people want fighters. People want someone to stand up and say, I don't care what it takes, but I will fight for you. And thus far, we've got people that are still trying to be very diplomatic. I'm telling you, no. I mean, people talk about crossing the aisle. No, thank you. I absolutely do not want you to cross the aisle. I want you to stand because they're going to do what they want anyway. So we need to stand up and say, I'm going to be in your way. You might roll over me, but I'm standing.
When you're dealing with bullies, you have to hit them hard.
You do. Yeah, but not actually, not physically, right? You're right, you gotta hit them hard. That's why things that are funny, like taco, because that gets under his skin. It makes him insane. Say it over and over again. I heard the other day that his Caroline Levitt is being called the Taco Bell with an E. That shit gets under their skin. Do it. Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Do you think the Democratic Party should maybe expand and focus on young men being radicalized? Because men my age, they follow Andrew Tate, they follow Nick Fuentes, they are radicalized online for hours and hours on internet access. They're also very bonkers and weird.
For some reason, there's a loneliness epidemic. I have to say that I raised three white men into adulthood, and a big part of my job as a mother was to constantly look at what they were looking at. Even with my 30-year-old son, he'll send me a couple TikToks, and I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Let me tell you why. It's a constant battle because it takes just a few seconds for them to be pulled down a rabbit hole, right? And I've seen what they're looking at, and sometimes you're like, well, I can understand where they would think that. But you're right. We need to be reaching younger men, and a lot of that is going to come from men reaching out to other men. And the good news is I see a lot of men here today. I go into spaces where it's all women. That happens quite frequently. So I'm glad to see the men here.
Happens when Trump dies.
You know we still have a problem once he's gone, right? They've already been radicalized. They're already drinking the Kool-Aid, so it's just going to be from him to another. So the problem is the radicalization, like you were speaking to earlier. And this happens, and it's going to happen even more. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the creepy, and I'm not that old woman, get off my lawn, but the AI stuff is getting a little creepy. And so I think that's going to make it even worse. And a lot of that technology, you know, that China has been using for a decade or more is coming here, so it's going to be even more radicalization, which is why we should be funding public schools so that people can recognize that. I know there are a lot of people who said we should have classes where we teach people to vet sources, and that we do. That's exactly what's happening in schools. We had a media literacy curriculum. We are teaching it, but we need to be funding schools, because you think that's happening in private religious schools? No. Absolutely not.
What do we need to do about people like Nancy Pelosi who are dragging the Democratic Party? With her 80-year-old self, and her 80-year-old people she wants sitting on, committee chairs, who are dying because they were riddled with cancer when she forced them in, keeping AOC down, keeping all of the young people down who are the future of this party. And I don't want to vote for Nancy Pelosi, and I don't think she has my best interest in her rattled brain. So, how do we steal our Democratic Party back from the 80-year-olds?
How do we show support for those young people and get them elevated?
Yes.
Right?
So I don't want to be ageist and talk about someone just because of their age, but I get what you're saying. So to promote the AOCs is to get behind them, to find these people in your community. There are young people in your community, and they are in this room right now that can run for office. People who can run for county commissioner, people who can run for state representative, people who can be put on school boards. Promote those people, not just because of their age, but because of their enthusiasm and because of their worldview. And we love AOC, you know why? Because she fights. Because she says what she says and does what she does, and she's willing to fight. And that's why we love 80-year-old Bernie Sanders, right? Because he fights, but he also brought AOC along with him, because he's saying, my time is limited, here is the person who's going to come behind me.
Yeah, question about how you deal with the religiosity in rural areas. I mean, people don't vote for Democrats in rural areas, and so there's no chance for a Democrat because the votes just aren't there. It's the exact opposite of a Republican who lives in Chicago, okay? But if people in these rural areas think that voting for a Democrat is literally a sin,
They do.
yeah, how do you fight that? I mean, and I'm not the one to do it, because I'm agnostic, so I don't care. I'm not your guy. But there are people in these rural communities who are Christian, and that's fine, good, great.
Yes.
How do we get them to show that you can be Christian and still be a Democrat?
One thing I do is that because I'm no longer a Southern Baptist, but when I would knock on doors and talk about the things that are completely nonpartisan that everybody in rural Missouri needs, I meet a combine on the road, I'm in trouble. I'm worried about my kids all the time because we don't have shoulders on the road because they have defunded these roads for so long. So when I go and talk about the schools, and not one door that I ever knocked on did someone say, I want to send my money to a private religious school. And most of the doors I would say were people who were answering were Christian or, claimed to be Christian. And so I would say, hey, I'm running. They would say, I love what you have to say. Are you a Republican or Democrat? And I was like, about that. And honestly, over and over again, they would say, I can't vote for you because I'm a Christian. So the problem is, I live in a town of 480 people. There are 4 churches out there, and 2 of them preach politics every single Sunday. You should not be able to preach politics behind the pulpit. In St. Joseph, Missouri, the pastor is Josh Blevins. I report him all the time to the IRS because he stands in front of his flock and says, these 2 people are running for school board. I want you to vote for these 2 people. And he even says, this is probably against our IRS exemption, but I'm going to do it anyway. And he does. Until we get that under control, it's difficult. But I will say that knocking doors, people are getting sick of it. They are sick of their schools 4 days a week. My congressman is Sam Graves, not quite as terrible as yours. He flies under the radar. But if you don't have taxes from a wind farm in northwest Missouri, your school's only 4 days a week. It is the only way you can stay open 5 days a week. Guess what Sam is trying to get rid of? Green energy. That would absolutely decimate. And so when I knock doors and tell people that, they're like, holy crap. You guys have to remember, we're dealing with people who don't understand what's going on day to day. We have, huge places where newspapers aren't coming out, much less daily or weekly. We have people getting all of their news from Facebook because there's no other place to get it. I have, the Maryville Forum used to be a daily, now it's a weekly. But here's the thing, you can open it up and all you're gonna see is conservative writing, because they give space to every representative. Guess what they are? They're all Republicans. The thing is to tell people in rural spaces, I live in a rural space because I don't like traffic and I don't want anyone to tell me what to do, right? And so I know that about my neighbors. I know they're gun owners. Guess who else is? Me, right? I'm the same thing they are, and that's why you have to have a candidate from every single area knocking those doors. Because I knock doors and people that watch Fox News all day come to the door and would never, ever think that I was a Democrat. Because I don't look like I'm supposed to look. I don't have a baby's ham hock laying, out of my mouth. I don't have the horns. So it's cognitive dissonance. Abortion. I was talking about abortion. I don't eat baby ham hocks. But that's why we do that, because it's your neighbor, and you trust your neighbor. I will say, yeah. I had a sweet student who was sent from St. Louis to knock doors with me in my hometown. She was so sweet. She knocked on her first door, my neighbor, and she said, my name is Chelsea. I'm from so-and-so in St. Louis. Would you like to talk about politics? No! So I moved her out of the way. Hey, I'm Jess. I live in Roger Lyon's old place. I was a teacher. I'm knocking doors for whatever. That's why we got to have people on the ground. And that's how we combat Christian nationalism.
Yes.
So we talked about nationalism, we talked about division, we talked about how even on the ballot, if you just got a little V, parenthetical V next to your name, that's a non-starter. That being the case, and as many people here who are as impressed with Bernie Sanders as I am, who has demonstrated that an independent platform can be a successful platform, and there's a lot of people that are frustrated with the two-party system. Do you think that there is value or in strategy, someone like me who's considering running for public office and running on an independent ticket?
I hope you run for office. Get him to run for office. better luck in our area being as an independent. The problem is that a lot of people will think, well, you're not gonna get any money from either party, but let me tell you a secret, you ain't gonna get money anyway. So you might as well run and raise it for yourself. But yeah, the only problem I have is when people say, why don't you run as a Republican? And then, no, because we're not doing that, because that doesn't help our cause. That's lying, that's tricking people. But running as an independent, you truly sound like an independent. I say go for it, run for office.
Do it, Gideon.
What are some actual steps that just an everyday person can take? Because I think what I've noticed since all of this is in Missouri, yes, we are red, but how many things have we brought to the ballot that were not red? That we thought, oh, my mother-in-law who's a Trumper, she voted to not, for the abortion ban to be brought down. And there's so many things that we as Missourians vote for that are considered socialist, blue, whatever. So what can we do to bring that bridge of like, it's not just red or blue, these are real issues, but then what can just a person like me do every day to like make a difference?
You mentioned something, it's not red versus blue, it's top versus bottom, and that's what we're fighting right now. And go ahead. You've probably heard me say this, Missouri's not red, Missouri's uncontested. The Democratic Party has left our state. You can look at Wisconsin, they have 136 paid Democratic employees. Missouri has three. There's a problem because they have disinvested, because they've looked at this and they've said it's too red and there's no reason to send any money here. But then the DNC, or the MDP has done the same thing. God love them, I'm not giving them any shade, but they look at districts like mine and say there's no reason to give her any money, she's not gonna win. Well, we can't come back if we don't do that. But you're right about people voting in their self-interest when there's not an R or D behind it. Those progressive agenda items that we put on the ballot didn't have R or D. People had to vote in their self-interest. My MAGA-loving stepdad, who's on YouTube all day long talking about chemtrails, loves to smoke weed, okay? He voted in his self-interest, okay? So this is what we need to understand. We've got to activate those people. We have to remind them, you don't think an abortion ban is appropriate for the state. Don't vote for that Republican on your ballot because they will undo your will. That's why we knock doors again, to connect the person to the policy. My representative is sweet as pie, a very kind man. He votes against all of our self-interest. I called him the other day. Guess what? He called me back. I said, did you vote against the sick pay? He said, yes. And I said, did you vote to get rid of the minimum wage? Well, no, Jess, I didn't do that. Right? And I was like, I didn't know it was two separate things. But he did vote against us on abortion too. But when I knock doors and I talk about Jeff Farnan, they're like, oh, isn't he a good guy? Isn't he a nice guy? He is, friend, but this is what he's voting for. That's why we knock doors. That's why we're in our community. Nothing changes without you guys being in your community and telling those people what they need to hear and aren't hearing.
Right. So we have a 2001 graduate of Joplin High School, went through the public education system, was on the board of the Herzog Foundation.
Oh, Lord.
What can we do to combat this? I just finished 15 years in public education, and even though I grew up with this person,
Can you repeat that question? We couldn't hear over here.
how can we fight the Herzog Foundation? They are trying to get vouchers for private religious schools, and one of their board members is a Joplin High School graduate.
Which one is it? Is it Voss?
And, Blanchard.
Okay. So the Herzog Foundation is problematic, and the way I talk to my neighbors about it is I always remind everyone, they're billionaires. They are billionaires. Why would billionaires want this policy? Why would they want to take money from public schools? And it literally goes back to the 30s, to FDR. They're pissed about having to pay taxes for schools. It's the same families. The DeVos family is from all of that. So reminding them that they are millionaires and billionaires, and the fact that It doesn't matter because most vouchers can't be used by the majority of Missourians. Anyone who is not in a bigger town has no access. And even if they do, the access they have is going to be a religious school. There are a lot of folks who are not religious. The closest school for me is 56 miles and it's Catholic. I'm not Catholic. So this is problematic. And like I said, not one door ever said, please take my money and send it to St. Joe to support those kids. Also, we should know that in Missouri, a study was done, Missouri Independent printed it, 2/3 of all the people in Missouri who got a voucher already had their kids in a private school. These are coupons for people who can afford to send their kids to school. They tear apart a school. You hear people say the money should follow the student. It shouldn't go into a system. What happens, the reason that it defunds schools is even if you take 7 kids out, say of my local school, and they all make, they all get $7,000. We can't shut down the 2nd grade class. We still have, 18 kids in there. You can't cut a teacher in half. You still need an auditorium. You still need cafeteria workers. You still need a librarian. So that's how I always explain it. The Herzog Foundation honestly needs to be dismantled. They should not have your money. They have your money in their pocket right now that they are sending to private religious schools. And every one of us should be up in arms over that.
We know that, we see Reagan, who was impeached.
Everything goes back to Reagan.
Everything goes back to Reagan, But he was impeached for way less than what Trump has been doing, even recently. I'm frazzled, I'm from the celebrity. But when do we see those actually paying out? We hear the courts are on our side, they're ruling against, but Trump is ignoring them. When do we get consequences for that? When do our people who follow him get consequences for that? Like Holly, like Liz, and so on.
There are no consequences until we absolutely demand it. And we know this because Trump was not held accountable for what he did on January 6th, and now he is president again. If he would have been held accountable, then we would not have him as a president right now. And a lot of Democrats have something to say about that. They are to blame as well for not holding him accountable. But we have to be in the streets. They don't honor anything except for money. We need a general strike, and that's hard for me to say because I work from home and I have enough to make it for a couple weeks. There's a lot of people who don't have anything in their savings account and have to show up to work every day. But as long as we keep acting like everything is okay and keep going on like this, it's not going to stop. It will never stop. The Supreme Court has told him over and over again, you cannot take people and send them to countries that they're not even from. And he says, sorry, too late, the plane is in the air. No, absolutely not. And while I'm on this topic, the people who look like me in this room, if you see someone being taken off the street, you put your body in front of them. You do not. Let your neighbors be taken. You do whatever you can. You lay in front of the car, be another Tiananmen Square. You stand in front, and they're not taking anyone.
And you tell those people to take their masks off.
That's right. Mask off.
Okay. About 40 years ago, our son graduated from Joplin High School, and he got a modest scholarship with the Optimist Club. At the banquet dinner that night, they had a fundraiser, an inspirational speaker talking about fundraising. I don't know if those laws have changed since then, but his point was for people like us to have a fundraiser. I don't know if you have to register, but the money that you get, you only have to give 10% to whatever cause it was, whatever political cause it was. You get to keep the other 90%. I think
Sounds shady.
have freely used their advantage, to make themselves rich while they take the money from their neighbors. But what if we do the same thing? Okay, I'm not in a position to have a big fundraiser, you know, but if you start out $10, bring $10, we'll have a big party. We'll talk about politics. You can keep some of the money, you give it some to your candidate, you keep spreading the money this way. Everybody gets to have a fundraiser, everybody gets to keep a little, give a little. Is that workable? Do you know how?
Well, I mean, I raise money for for Democrats, but the Republicans always have their checkbooks open, honestly, and as Democrats, we don't always have our
That's what I
checkbooks
mean.
open.
You know, so raising it from your neighbors, your friends, everybody gets together, so, you know.
And this is what I would say, you know, I'm not sure about that, but you should definitely get with Indivisible and, you know, have some sort of fundraiser. But for me, when I give to candidates, I give to the candidate. I give to the candidate. I go to their page, I open it up, and I send money to the candidate. Because then I know that I'm supporting the person that I want to win, and they are going to get the money. Yes?
This is a bold assumption. I'm pretty sure I'm the youngest person in this room now.
Yay! Give her a round of applause.
She's the youngest person.
There's more than that you can do than I can do. You have access to people who are your age, who may be apathetic, who may look around and go, what's the point, right? I mean, we've left you an earth on fire. We've left you no entry-level jobs because AI is coming in and taking them. We have left you in a police state. We have left you in climate danger. You are the person to go out and say the things that need to be said, to push the people like AOC, to push the progressives who mean something to you. So you start talking to people, you create a club, you go online and you say the things that need to be said, but you have more power than you can ever know. And thank you for being here.
I know so many people that voted against that because they were being told that you could send a transgender kid to school and they could change their gender at school. We all know in this room.
I accidentally snorted.
Information like that in a way that will actually get through to people besides you just saying it.
I'm glad that you bring that up because that's exactly what they're going to do when they put it back on the ballot. They're going to say that they're keeping kids from, you know, going through transition, which we know doesn't even happen in Missouri anyway, much less at a school. I couldn't get my kids to bring a freaking pencil, and I can change their gender. But you've done exactly what you need to do. Talk to your neighbors and say, this sounds outlandish, doesn't it? You know Miss Baker. You think she's transitioning kids in the library? Oh, I didn't know there's a young person here. I'm sorry for cussing. I'm so sorry. But you poke fun at it. And you say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
I have the printed out documents and I would hand them out to people.
Good for you.
And I'm like, read this because this is
Yes.
everything in the bill and that's all I know to do. But I
Absolutely.
There's an easier way.
Nope, just talking. We have to talk. It's called deep canvassing for a reason. When I was knocking doors, sometimes people would keep me an hour at a door, because they had never seen or talked to a Democrat, they thought. Because a lot of times in Democratic, you know, in rules basis, people are scared. I ain't scared. What are you gonna do? Defund my school? Take away my bodily autonomy? Not pave my road? You already did it. There's nothing more you can do. Talk to your neighbors. I got time for one more.
Oh, just on that abortion thing, I know I'm from Springfield, I'm from Arkansas, whatever. They don't think the DNC they think it's different.
Yes.
Like the whole abortion thing, I would try to have conversations like, yes, that is an abortion, and DNC is an abortion, and they had some whole other term for it that they were using, and it was like,
Can I say that this is very important, because for a long time Democrats have gotten away from the word abortion and they started using reproductive rights because they thought the word was offensive, and that's why that happened. Because they don't realize, I mean, I've had miscarriages, and when I go in, I forget the name for it, was something abortion. Spontaneous abortion, right? And I had never seen that word before as an evangelical, and I was pretty horrified. We've got to use the word. The medical procedure is an abortion. So say the word. Okay, one more. I said one more, but
So I like to inform myself rather than all this propaganda, etc. heard for how long about Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation.
Yep.
Where's the anti-fascism?
Here.
No, I mean, what is it called and where do we find it?
There, we don't have that compiled like they do. It's very difficult in organizing Democrats, because this is what I do. None of us in here, we're all on a spectrum, but we have wildly different ideas of what it means to be a Democrat or progressive or an independent, and we don't have that list. It would be nice, but at the same time, we do what's best for our communities. And so in different communities, that's going to be different things. We haven't decided on high, this is what we're going to do because this benefits the oligarchs, which is what they have done. But we are working for our different communities. So we don't have a book, but we have our brain, and we have critical thinking, and we have community. And I have to tell you, friends, that is the biggest thing, because a lot of us aren't going to church anymore because of what has happened in many of our churches. We don't have a public space where we can be together and visit and be in community, but this is why this is important. If you could do it once a week, you should do it once a week, even if you had signs in the median, right? Okay, one more and I promise.
I want to know how many people came here by themselves. That's what I want to know.
What she said? How many people came by themselves?
I think she means good for you, but also, did you know someone you could bring? Because that doubles our numbers.
Just the point that there are this many people in the room and there's this much disconnection.
Yeah. And I hope that someone took up emails, or someone is putting you guys back into, like, I'm not trying to steal your data, but so that you can find each other again, so that this community can come together again. Well, I appreciate you, friends, so much. Thank you. Thank you.